we go.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Stronsky, and I'm from the Carnegie Endowment in Washington, D.C. And I'd like to welcome everyone who's overseas. Good afternoon and good evening for those of you watching from elsewhere outside the United States. On behalf of the Carnegie Endowment and the Eurasia Foundation, I'd like to welcome you to this Google Hangout session on tech building, peace building through tech, lessons from Eurasia and the Middle East. We have a great lineup of experts with us today who work on various angles of tech and peace building and how to sort of bridge cultural and social and ethnic conflicts. And sadly, the need for this type of work seems to be proliferating at a rapid pace across the globe. And one of the areas we'll be discussing, the Middle East. It's a region that has experienced a lot of turmoil over the last few years, and whether that's been in Syria, Iraq, Israel, Palestine, these are places where tech has a role to play in trying to bridge divided communities and bridge cultural differences. And in another part of the world that we'll be looking at today, Eurasia, which is the former Soviet Union areas, we have long-standing conflicts in places like Abkhazia, Georgia, places like Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also new conflicts in Ukraine. And there are periodically flare-up of ethnic violence in places like Central Asia. So this type of work is broadly needed. And I would even say in the West, in the United States, we have a backlash against immigrants and against Muslims right now in our political rhetoric. So there's a lot of work that we can do here in the United States to sort of help bridge cultural misunderstandings between societies, both here and societies overseas. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Derek Kalin, who is a games designer and a Games for Peace advocate and a specialist at the Peace Tech Lab. He has experience in peace and tech in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. We have Justin Hefter, who is the co-founder and CEO of Bandura Games, a game company that is started by Americans, Israelis, and Palestinians. And then we also have Nina Nanitashvili, who's the lead advisor for the South Caucasus at the Elva Community Engagement NGO, which is in Tbilisi, Georgia. And she's the head of communications at the School of Economics at Tbilisi State University. Right now, she's a Eurasia Foundation Bill Maines Fellow, and she has worked on the Caucasus. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, who is Derek, to give sort of a broad overview about his work and his background. And then we'll have the other ones and then launch hopefully a very fruitful discussion. So why don't we start? Go, Derek.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Derek Kalin. I work at the Peace Tech Lab, and I'm just delighted for the opportunity to participate in this conversation. So thank you to Carnegie and Eurasia Foundation for this opportunity. So the discussion today is around the application of technology to peace building. But at the lab where I work, we've kind of learned to distinguish or break down technology into a couple of different fields. So we work at the intersection of technology, media, and data, and try to work with peace builders around the world to apply these three different highly related categories to each other to be more effective peace builders and to address violent conflict. So most of my experience is over the past few years I've been working on a project called Peace Tech Exchanges in Iraq, where we've been connecting peace builders throughout the country to low-cost, easy-to-use tools to help them be more effective communicators, to collect, analyze, and share data more effectively, and to make engaging media that not only allows them to communicate to a civilian populace, but for peace builders to communicate amongst each other, which is vital for effective action. And in our mind, these are the three main categories for peace builders to act on. So if I can, I'd like to share one particular story about how we've seen technology enhance the work of peace builders, and maybe that grounds the conversation a little bit more. I'm also delighted to talk about the cool things that I think are going on with Justin and Nino's projects. So in Iraq, one of the major problems that civil society organizations have is that they don't have good control over data. Collection is difficult. Oftentimes organizations are still using paper to collect information, which is hard to translate and synthesize and analyze and share. And this is a big problem, especially in the parts of the country where there's a massive refugee and IDP population problem. Over 3 million IDPs are displaced in Iraq today, and the number of people who are living outside their homes, often in camps with minimal resources, is on the rise. And there are a number of peacebuilding organizations working to take care of these displaced people and make sure that they don't add to the conflict or add to the challenges faced by Iraqi civil society. So the lab has helped several organizations use a tool called Kobo Toolbox, which is a free platform developed by the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. It allows you to build a survey very simply and easily, kind of like even a Google Doc, a Google survey. But it also allows you, the user, to collect information outside of an area with internet connectivity. So as a result of using this tool, one peacebuilding organization called the People's Development Organization was able to go into an IDP camp, collect large amounts of data about IDPs, find who was sick, who had had access to a doctor, what sort of medical resources they had, collect information about 2,700 people, and then quickly share it out in an effective story to local media, which got the attention of local government, and ended up getting something like $12,000 worth of aid for the IDP community that they were trying to support. And all of this with a free data collection tool. So at the end of the day, tools aren't a panacea. With the rise of the Islamic State, we've seen very poignantly how media can be used for people who want to spread messages of hate as well as messages of peace building. But it is a tool, and the goal for peace builders should be to find out where these tools are, how to use them so that they can be most effective in their work.
Thanks, Derek. Justin, do you have you want to give your overview as well?
Yes, of course. And thank you, Paul, for hosting and having me, and thanks to everyone for attending today. So I'm going to give a little bit of my own personal background, how I came to peace technology, and then once I got involved, what some of the findings were, especially around games. So I graduated from Stanford University in 2011, and one of the big things that I worked on at Stanford was hosting events to bring the Jewish and Muslim students at Stanford together. And what was amazing was we found that the most effective way of bringing people together was through purely fun, non-political events. Events that got people in the same rooms, interacting one-on-one, learning about their overlap and about their similarities, and we were able to create dozens of relationships. And so the question that I had was, how do we take those one-on-one experiences and scale them up and bring them to the millions of people who will never have the opportunity to interact face-to-face? And for me, this was especially important for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, where there is actual physical separation between the populations that we're trying to bring together. It's not safe for them necessarily to be interacting face-to-face. So I'm going to show a couple of slides here that outline a little bit of the research that I've done since embarking on this question. So I ended up starting a company called Bandura Games. We're building mobile games and a mobile social network that are able to connect people and build empathy for people of different backgrounds from around the world, and especially from across conflict zones. Now, how can games create the same types of relationships that one-on-one interaction can create? What you're looking at here is it's a New York Times article from 2011 about a couple that fell in love after playing World of Warcraft, actually a violent game online. They were avatars. They never met in person, but they shot at each other, they killed each other, started talking, ended up meeting in person and falling in love. And I thought that, wow, this is an amazing story of the power of games to create relationships. There's got to be other games out there. There's got to be other research out there for the potential for games to create relationships. And so I continued looking, and sure enough, there were. There's two really fantastic studies. One out of McGill University, Jeffrey Mogul found that when he brought strangers into a room to play a cooperative game, cooperative games are team-based games where on the same team as someone, on average, it took 15 minutes for total strangers to become friends when playing these cooperative team-based games. Another study this year out of the University of Aarhus in Denmark found that when players played a cooperative team-based game together, their heart rates started to sync. Their heart rates started to physically beat as one. And so there were sociological as well as physiological benefits of playing games together on the same team. And so I said, okay, let's see if we can prove this in the Israeli-Palestinian context. So I traveled to Israel last year during the summer of 2014 with an idea of starting Bandura Games. I met an Israeli gamer, Itai Foreman, who had worked for one of the largest gaming companies in Israel. He had a Palestinian friend who he'd met on one of those face-to-face programs in Germany, an Israeli-Palestinian program that sent youth to Germany. So his friend Amuna had experience with games, doing intercultural dialogue with games. She did a workshop in Jordan. And so the three of us got together. We bonded over our love of games. We thought, how can we use our love of games to create those same bonds for Israeli and Palestinian kids? So we went out, we started surveying hundreds of Israeli and Palestinian youth, and here's what we found. We were very surprised. First of all, we found that of the youth who we surveyed about 200 to 300 youth, 85% of Israelis, this was in Beersheba and Jerusalem and in Ramallah in the West Bank, we found that 85% of Israelis and Palestinians had access to smartphones and tablets. Huge amounts of access, despite the fact that these youth are growing up in a conflict region where violence is all around them. 50% of their favorite games were nonviolent. They liked Candy Crush, FIFA, racing games. And then 50% of the games that they played, their top 10 games, were the exact same games. They were playing the same games. They're doing the same sorts of things to have fun. And we decided we'd look at other conflict regions as well to see if this was the case. And sure enough, if you look online, App Annie aggregates real-time data for games. If you look at the top 10 games between Israel and Jordan, 60% of the top 10 games are the same games. If you look at Israel and Saudi Arabia, 50% of the top 10 games are the same games. And if you look at India and Pakistan, 80% of the top 10 games are the same games. Now, when you compare, say, Israel and the United States, however, only 20% overlap. And so what we found, and this was the same case for overlap between the United States and India, United States and Pakistan, what we found was that youth across conflict zones actually have more in common with one another than they do with youth from the West. And so we decided to take that research and start building games that played to the overlap between youth. And so our games are connecting youth based on their overlapping interests, and the hope that once we're able to create those connections, we can hopefully overcome the hatred that youth are feeling towards each other across these conflict zones.
Great, thank you very much, Justin. One of the things that I think you mentioned, the importance of politicizing some of these conflicts and getting what you did at Stanford and getting people together. It sort of reminds me of a lot of the sort of other ways, the non-tech ways that people have been trying to do this in the past, whether it's through cross-border environmental programs, cross-border economic development programs, women's empowerment. So this sort of seems to be the next step in a lot of these conflict resolution toolkits that we've been using. So so thanks for bringing that out.
Thanks.
Yep. And Nino, why don't we turn to you and hear about your experiences both with gaming and what you're doing in the Caucasus as well.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that it's really an honor to be here on this Hangout, and I'm very delighted to be 2015 Bill Mines Fellow at Eurasia Foundation, because this fellowship really kind of got me thinking again of how important this topic is and how much we have to expand it in terms of scale and involve more young people. So just briefly about myself, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would have anything related to tech, I would say no, because I was studying social science and was taught all these traditional ways of how social change happens, how you have to make something different. But then, you know, when you're a young person, you realize that technologies are really the tools that can enable you to do magical things, even in very challenging environments. And then when we started a tech community in Georgia, which was under Google, and then we tried to emphasize on the importance of technology and bring more professionals to the field. And last year I joined NGO ELVA, which is based in Georgia, but the projects are implemented in more than 15 countries. And the basic approach of ELVA is to help solve the social challenges by using modern tools and innovative approaches. And in general, what we do is data-driven advocacy. So basically, we collect data, visualize this data, and make it accessible for stakeholders, for them to be well informed and to make decisions and provide assistance based on the actual needs that community has. And then what we started doing is that going actually to the on site and trying to do projects on a very grassroots. So not only to map problems and just talk about these issues that have been there over time, but actually to be involved with beneficiaries. So this is where we started working on a confidence building project. As many know, we have frozen conflict for more than 20 years with the Abkhazians, and it started when I was born. So, and I'm now 23 years old, and I grew up, and you know, I know that there are young people on the other side that grew up as well, and they have their own lives, their own interests, and there are younger generation who even don't know about each other anything, because the borders are closed. You cannot really get together unless you go somewhere else. And yes, there are a lot of different peace building efforts, but most of them are concentrated on professionals or adults. So we wanted to do something with a generation that has never been as much involved in peace building processes, and find the way that they would feel the most comfortable doing this, and they would really enjoy doing this. So so we just assumed that the, you know, as Justice said, a lot, you know, games are something that people have in common, especially, as he said, in the areas that are close to each other. So we assumed that these kids anyway play virtual games with people from around the world. So why cannot we put these kids in two different rooms but create one virtual space for them to get along? So we looked at the example of what Israel had, precisely the organization Games for Peace, who were extremely helpful for us to adjust their model and curriculum to a local context. And we started initiating this project where we had six locations, two of them paired with each other, that would undergo four different sessions. This interaction happened through Minecraft, very famous game and very lovable game with for some of the young people, and each time they would have different tests, and they would play in mixed groups, so that in order to beat the second color group, whether it's red or blue, you have to really go out from your room and start communicating with others and collaborating, because otherwise you won't be able to, you know, really complete this quest. So we had chats, but like integrated chat, game chat, from where they could communicate, and there was a plugin which would translate the messages in their local language, because we found out that yes, we're bringing these kids together in a virtual space, but they don't speak the same language, or they don't even speak the same foreign language, because most of the young Georgians know English, while it's not as popular in Abkhazia. So So together with our Israeli partners, we installed a plugin that would automatically translate languages and like their messages in their own languages. And this was kind of achievement because by doing this project, we didn't only defeat the political or geographic barriers, but the linguistic ones as well. Because if we would have put these kids together in one room, they would have not been able to communicate because they just don't speak the same language. So, so this made this communication really natural for them because it wasn't something that we were forcing them to do because A, they were doing something they enjoyed, and B, they were communicating in their own language, and C, they just were part of one group that had one main goal of doing something together. And these sessions happen once a week or twice a week, and we could see a lot of improvement in the perceptions, into the rate of engagement as they increased as we were advancing from one session to another. And as a second component of this game is that we try to challenge ourselves and challenge Georgians, I guess Georgian game developers, to do our own game, which is called Peacepark, and it's now accessible for everyone online, and you can download it on your desktop or mobile application. And I'll actually show you the game. But the main idea of the game is that we wanted to make something very neutral, to avoid any mentioning of any space or ethnicity or just not talking about politics, but rather make a virtual space that would have some educational aspects but be playful enough for the young people to get interested with this. So there we have Peacepark, which was developed after a series of consultations with different experts, with conflict experts, with game designers. We are really appreciative of the work that Mark Greenhagen has done for us, and then we have this game that is built on just teaching kids basic conflict resolution skills in terms of how you should be taking different perspectives, how you should find a common ground for these people to interact, and when you're in the conflicts, how much you have to, worry about all parties involved. So you cannot really be subjective and worry about one part, but rather you have to get into shoes of everyone and make sure that everyone meets their needs. Because if at least one person is not happy, the game is ruined, and you cannot really go on the second level. So I'll probably show the game and you understand, but I'll quickly mention that the game is built on the logics that you have 5 different families coming to the park. So let's say 5 different nations using one region, so one common ground, but there are some differences in them. So one family dislikes 2 other families but likes 2 other families. So but the task for the gamer is to make everyone get along. And the key here is to find objects in the park or activities in the parks that they enjoy more than they dislike each other. So this is a basic task that the gamers has to do, as of exploring what they like and exploring how to make their relationships positive and not get into more conflict. And this is how you expand. You go into levels. And no money can help you, or no size of the park, but you have to reach the happiness rate of the park. And I forgot to mention in the beginning that this project was funded by UNDP and European Union, their initiative COBRAM, which is Confidence Building Early Response Mechanism. And we have to be really appreciative to them, because this was a crazy idea in the beginning. No one really believed it would work out, and having trust with such organizations was really helpful, because we were able to do whatever we had as a dream of doing. And of course my colleagues were really wonderful, every coordinator involved in each center. And now I'll show you the game, because I guess you're interested in how it looks actually. I hope it. Okay. So this is just a video of a demo. We currently have 25 levels, and all of these levels most of the levels were designed by actual game designers, so we brought community together. So in the park you have objects you can choose from, like on the lower bar, and then places where you want these objects to be settled, and then you hit play and you're just waiting what happens, because you have people coming in the park and you're just observing whether they like, for instance, the seesaw or not. And in this case, these two kids like the seesaw, and there's their kid who likes the swing, but then there comes someone else, and let's see if they like it as well or not. So bench. And now as the icons pop up from their head, you get to know who doesn't like what or who likes what. So see, this exclamation mark means that someone is unhappy, like you didn't do something right. So then you have to replay, basically, because after you set the part, you cannot really intervene. You have to play it over and over again until you find the best combination within your budget to place objects. Or you'll just get everyone, because if someone is unhappy, everyone's happiness rate goes bad, because no one wants to be around those who are unhappy. So here the player added some objects within the budget, so that this kid also has something to play with, the one that was left out in the first try. So the idea is that you have to wisely choose the object that can benefit the exact amount of people that you're having in the park, and you put them in the way that some people who don't like each other are not really close to each other, or if they are, you put something that both of them like. So this was our idea and the game, and it's now a single player, but we do hope to get a second version when to multiplayer. So
good morning to you, ladies. My name is Jackson. Welcome to Ike.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, those are the ideas. I'm very much looking forward to your feedback. As the time was short, I couldn't, of course, talk about in depth of the project process and the impact it had. But I guess we'll go over those questions as we move into the question.
Yeah, Paul, if I can jump in here, I kind of wanted to feed off of the point that you made in introducing Nino's game, which is the idea that in some ways games are kind of an extension of existing peace-building activities. And I think that's totally true. In my mind, a lot of games for peace-building programs, like the Games for Peace methodology employed in Israel, or that framework that informed Nino's work, are very similar actually to sports diplomacy programs, where the idea is that you're just bringing people together and having them interacting in some sort of controlled environment where they're working towards a common goal. So, in that way, social games become like a digital space for interaction between people who ordinarily don't interact that much. I mean, take the example of Israel and Palestine. It is a segmented society where people often are living just a few kilometers from each other, but unable to meet face-to-face and interact without a significant effort. But in the space of games and online, you can create a digital space, whether it be in Minecraft or some other world, where people can meet and engage with each other and do the basic humanization that is necessary for peace building, particularly in a protracted, divided conflict. I also think that you can, as much as games can be employed in traditional peace building methodologies, it's really cool to think about how games are different from traditional peace building methodologies and give you more options, right? Like if you think of games as media, peace builders are used to passive forms of media, right? Like television programs, radio programs that are great. They can effectively convey ideas, but they're also just one-way conversations. And if we look at, teaching methodologies and other other studies, it indicates that interactive forms of education and interactive experiences are shaping. They can shift knowledge, they can change attitudes, and they can even shift behaviors. So as we're starting as peace builders to think about games as tools, it's kind of exciting to think about the options and the opportunities. And I also wanted to give a shout out for Justin's company, Bandura Games, just for the point that you had mentioned earlier, Paul, around the idea of sustainability. Like, Justin is coming at this as a peace builder, but also as somebody who wants to be able to like fund and continue his engagements. The source of a lot of Justin's funding was from a recent Kickstarter campaign. So it was crowdsourced, which is also, by the way, crowdsourcing tools are great tools for peace builders. And ideally, once the game comes out, it will be able to support its own development and expansion based off of revenue gained from inside the game, which is a very different model from the sorts of challenges that peace builders traditionally have, where you have a grant, it goes for 1 or 2 years, and then you have to seek more funding. It's a different process by which we can. I think that peace builders should start to think about this is a way that they can fund their work.
And I'll add to that, Derek. Oh, Paul, did you want to jump in?
I was going to ask you to talk a little bit more about your model and how you sort of can move from sort of relying on the sort of constant stream of grants to one that can be more sustainable for the long term.
I mean, there were a number of reasons why we chose to be for-profit as opposed to nonprofit, and as we went on this journey of doing surveys and doing interviews, for-profit did seem to be the best solution for what we wanted to achieve. There were a couple of different benefits to it. The first was, having worked within the peace community, the Israeli-Palestinian peace community, the community itself caters to those who already are predisposed to a more liberal, more open mindset. So the community, you see a lot of the same people, even the youth who are participating, either go to schools that have a more liberal mindset. And we wanted to reach the people who were, deeper ingrained in the conflict, who really would never go to, say, a Seeds of Peace event or a Paris Center for Peace event. And as we talked to those people, we said, look, would you play a game if would you play a game with an Israeli? Would you play a game with a Palestinian? The answers were no, we wouldn't. But the question was, would you play a fun game that kids around the world were playing? And the answer was yes, of course. So that was one shift that made us start thinking, okay, maybe this should start being more global. The second was, having worked in nonprofits, that change in scope from year to year based on the grants that you have, based on the donors that you have. Derek mentioned that we raised on Kickstarter. We also it was Indiegogo. I'll give Indiegogo the credit.
Thank you. Yes.
We also did take actual seed investment as a startup. We're based here in San Francisco, in the heart of Silicon Valley. We're behaving as a startup, and it's interesting. We have this model for impact, and our investors have a model for revenue. So we're able to show mobile games specifically, which by 2018 are going to be a $45 billion market. Cooperative games, the games that I was talking about, the team-based collaborative games for mobile, could be by 2018 a $10 billion market. And so ads, in-game purchases, there's other social revenue streams that we're developing as a company that will allow us to be sustainable. And so we see mobile as being the future of games. Mobile is permeating. We saw from our research 85% of the young Israelis and Palestinians who we interviewed had access to mobile. I was talking to some peace builders in Africa and Kenya. I think penetration in Kenya of smart devices is 65%, something around there. So you're seeing smart devices become ubiquitous around the world as the price for these devices drop. Chinese manufacturers are making extremely cheap smart devices that run Android software that are reaching people in places where we never would have thought possible just 2 years ago. And so that trend of mobile is only going to increase, and as a for-profit, we're both able to sustain ourselves globally as well as have a significant impact.
All right. Thanks, Justin. That was really good. One thing I want to mention to all of our viewers: feel free to send us questions. We've just gotten one, and I'm gonna, before I go to that question, I'm gonna sort of piggyback on something that Justin said. But you you talked about sort of your model for impact and sort of the model of the investors, which is more for revenue. I would like actually all three of the panelists to sort of talk about how do you judge impact? How do you judge success of a game? How do you judge success of a project that is using technology for peace building? How do you determine if there's been is it a change of behavior? Is it if you have people working, doing a game that's global, but they don't want to do it, with a Palestinian or Israeli, how do you sort of translate that into sort of the peace building sort of on the ground?
I can start. Well, I guess our projects have different layers of impacts because yes, our beneficiaries were directly young people, but this project took in the process a lot of coordinators who had to pair together to actually make sure that these kids had opportunity to meet each other, and of course there were the project team, the game designers who started thinking more sensitively about the games they develop and about this educational or social aspect their games should have. But in terms of going back to young people, so as Justin said, we were also facing the same situation that when we were talking about the project in the beginning, there were some tensions of not being interested to get involved, and it took us several months to get for instance Abkhaz centers on board, but then what we realized at the end of the project when we collected feedback is that everyone was very excited to be part of this project again. So that was already something, because in the beginning we had to be very sensitive about even mentioning that there are Georgians involved in this project. Well, in the end, they knew they were Georgians, but they still were so excited to be part of this project again. And the way that we had 4 different sessions, and we saw a lot of more kids coming in on 3rd or 4th sessions than it was in the first session. So the idea got spread out, and they thought this is not really something that would harm us, and they're not really making us do something or solve a conflict as a politicians. But we just, they really got what we asked them. We just asked them to play what they are actually doing it by themselves. So I guess that is an impact. And also, we didn't manage to do this yet. But I guess translating this virtual interaction into actual physical meeting would be something that would actually measure what was the impact, because they're assuming that after meeting virtually for some period of time, they would have already built relationships, and it would be much easier for them to get along when they meet physically, because that it would have served as an icebreaker for them, and they know each other's names, they know what they like, how they play, they have common stories to tell, like how they played this one session, for instance. So I believe that this virtual sessions can be taken as one, like you can only do virtual sessions, but also translate into physical can be something that generates real impact and is more sustainable and creates more bonds and ties.
So the game is the first piece of sort of a peace building project where you get people to do something fun, they sort of get more comfortable, and then you move to the second where you try to bring some people together. Great.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting model, and just the idea of using games as a way to introduce people to each other in order to have a more lasting interpersonal relationship in face-to-face interactions is awesome. I think we should also look at games as having a unique tool set for measuring impact that we don't normally get in traditional media. Right, with television programs or radio programs, oftentimes the way that we gather data is through surveys after the fact, or announcing in a radio program where you have a specific message for people to text in their feedback using frontline SMS or something like that. With games, you actually have the opportunity to track user behavior as long as they're inside the digital space. So, for example, there's one group working on a project called Peace Superheroes, where they're trying to teach kids about effective ways to deal with anger, to deal with bullying in schools, basically nonviolence instruction. And what they're finding over the course of building their game is that within the game they can track how well a person is learning. So if you give somebody a task in the very beginning about managing their anger, or by interacting with somebody in the digital space, saying, like, so they have to demonstrate meaningful behaviors, like asking open-ended questions or demonstrating empathy, and say they fail at the beginning of the exercise. At the end of the gameplay, you can have the exact same challenge repeated, and you could measure whether people have improved in it, which is a cool way to measure whether the skills that you were trying to transfer through gameplay are actually ones that transfer. So as we start using games in our work, it'll be interesting to see how peace builders find innovative ways to track user behavior and attitude shifts.
Great.
I think both what Nuno and Derek have said is spot on. To Nuno's point, I think games are, I've been calling Bandura games step 0.5 in the process. It's not gonna, I don't think one game is gonna solve world peace, but in our interactions with Israeli and Palestinian youth, almost 95%, maybe 99%, had never met someone from the other side. They didn't even have a concept of what an Israeli or Palestinian child looked like, did, liked, behaved. There was no even sense for what those people were like on either side. And so a basic success metric is how many visuals are you getting for an Israeli and a Palestinian? How many interactions are you getting between youth across conflict zones? Because that's creating basic recognition. Now, to Derek's point about on games using technology, being able to track real-time behavior is huge. So the process for the games that we're building, you're paired with someone anonymously. You don't know who you're being paired with. You're working together on the same team, and only after you've reached a critical level of partnership, a critical level of relationship, are you then revealed who that person is, where they're playing from. And then you're able to add them as a friend on our social network. Now, what we'll define as success is a week later when those people are playing again, when they've actually taken the agency themselves, when that relationship, we start to see repeat gameplay. So it's not just the fact that they're getting paired once, it's that they want to and are deciding to on their own play again, and that's something that we're able to track. And that really is the benefit of games, is being able to track that behavior. So Derek and Nuno, really, yeah, amazing points.
Yeah, and just now I'm thinking of a couple of different examples. Like there's a really interesting seminal game that was produced in 2005 called Peacemaker, in which the player acts as the head of state for one side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In 2012, I forget the university, but someone did a study of people who played this game and found that it actually had a significant impact on the audience's perceptions of people on the other side of the conflict. So, Peacemaker is an example of a game that causes us to challenge our preconceived notions of what options are available to somebody on the other side of the conflict, and by forcing the player to interact with somebody on the other side of the conflict, or pretend that they are the head of the Palestinian Authority or the Prime Minister of Israel, suddenly get a new form of empathy and perception of the challenges faced by both sides. That's meaningful.
I just want to add on very quickly about Justin's point of getting visuals of each other, because that was also a case for our project that these kids, 100% of them have never talk to anyone from another side. And then in like a third session, we started introducing video calls. So we told them, hey, you just actually watch each other, or we would share photos of each other and kind of tell them this is how they played and this is how their room looks. And then whenever we would have this video calls, and by the end of the session we would announce, so the winner is red team, we would ask everyone to come together to their webcams and take a group picture with the Skype. So this was an emotion that I guess everyone who participated in the sessions remembers, because it was something they felt really in the same room, in the same environment, and they felt like you know, there's not much difference between them. And you know, once in a while asking each other's names, they would figure out, you know, you have the same name in another room, and it's like, how come? So there are the small little details, I guess, that generate change in their perceptions and in the ways they perceive each other. And of course, there is a room of exploring a lot of more opportunities in terms of, you know, monitoring impact and actually evaluating how it happened, maybe after several years or right after the game, as Derek mentioned, like in-game evaluation systems. So I think we have really great ideas here to kind of expand what we're doing already or what others are doing who are watching right now.
So there's really sort of there's sort of the short-term impact and the short-term results that you can see, whether people are playing again, people sort of interacting in sort of webcams and video and things like that. And then there's also the longer-term sort of the step building, you know, breaking some of these boundaries now and years coming later. We have some questions from the audience, and I'd like to sort of turn to them. Some of them we've sort of dealt with a little bit, so I might change them slightly from what we have two questions that talk sort of about how you can facilitate interaction through games. And I think we've talked a little bit about you're not just sort of playing a game, but the different ways you try to connect players and different ways you try and connect players from different cultures. But also, you know, what are the other ways besides games that you can use tech to bring conflicting parties together? Because games is one tool, but what are the other ones that are out there to help sort of really get people interacting across some of these sort of geographical or cultural barriers?
Well, one example on the latter point might be producing other forms of media, right? I'm thinking of the Peace Tech Lab and USIP's television series Salaam Shabam, which was a television show that went on for 3 years in Iraq that had a goal of bringing together youth from all 18 provinces and all levels of economic income, Kurdish, Sunni, Shia, into a single space and then having them participate in a reality TV show, kind of a compete to collaborate kind of experience. So not only were you bringing those children from all different parts of the country together and having them interact in positive ways, but you were demonstrating this to like a broader community of Iraq to show that such positive interaction was possible. There's also the chance for technology to provide the means for collaboration around various different activities. So what I'm thinking of in this case is like data analysis. There are initiatives where people can come together online to respond to various crises, humanitarian disasters that often lead afterwards to conflicts over resources. I'm thinking of Patrick Meyers' initiative to crowdsource the processing of images from just after satellite images from just after disasters like tsunamis or earthquakes, where it's possible for peacebuilders or really just average ordinary people to come together and collaborate on a project of tagging which roads are down or where power lines have been broken. As we go forward and we go like the tools for open source tools for gathering information from conflict zones, like the Elliot Higgins Bellingcat project, as these tools developed and progress, are there ways that the broader population can all work together on projects that have real impact towards peace building? There's two examples there.
I would say, on the games question, how to get people to interact, make fun games. When people are playing something fun, as Derek mentioned earlier, whether it's sports diplomacy or whether it's a game, they forget their barriers. They forget the lines that divide them. They're having too much fun. And so that really is step one. Just make it as fun as possible. Even World of Warcraft, right, got people married, right? That was a byproduct of just having a really fun game. And so that's the power of games, is that if it's fun, people will forget that they're supposed to hate each other. To other platforms, I've got a very dear, I'm Jewish, I've got a very dear Muslim friend from the Middle East who grew up, who was taught to hate Jews growing up. And when Facebook came out, he decided that he wanted to go on Facebook and meet Jews so he could find out why they hated Muslims. And from his mindset, from what he was taught, and he goes on Facebook, starts adding people from Israel, ends up becoming friends with these people from Israel, getting connected to a group called Yalla Young Leaders, which is an online platform that's using Facebook as a way of getting people to connect. And so what's amazing about social media as well as games is it's able to reach people in unexpected places in unexpected ways. And you get those people who might otherwise be appreciative of, say, an ISIS ideology, just happening to be on social media discovering peace. And so while you have groups of like ISIS who are using social media to spread hatred, as a peace builder trying to use technology, we have an opportunity to be a non-state actor also using social media to spread love and to spread connection. And so social media is also a huge tool to reach people in parts of the world that would never otherwise find or seek out peace.
I'm also thinking of somebody that both Justin and I met recently. There's a guy named Matthew Nolan who has a project called Verona, which is a dating app that brings people from different sides of a conflict together. So he's starting it out with Israelis and Palestinians, and has about 10,000 users where they're just connected to people on the other side of the divide. And I think he's planning, if it's successful, to spread the app to the Indian-Pakistan conflict, or even he was talking about Democrats and Republicans in the U.S., which is quite the heated conflict itself, and or like even Boston Red Sox and Yankees fans, whatever. The idea is that there are new technologies for bringing people together in ways that we don't expect. And by the way, that's also a for-profit company that he's hoping to launch.
Yeah, for-profit dating app. That's hilarious and amazing and so far effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Derek, there's a question for you about, you mentioned the sophisticated messaging of ISIS, and are there effective tech-based counter-messaging for these types of sort of ideologies that are also using tech? And what types of tech or mobile-based messaging can effectively counter violent extremist messaging? I work a lot on Russia, and there's a lot of very negative stuff coming out on Twitter and other things about the United States and about the West from Russian nationalists, and how can tech be used to counter-message some of this stuff?
So it's an awesome and very important question, and it's one that we've been tackling at the lab for some time. There are no easy answers, but there are two observations that I would make about effective counter-messaging campaigns and providing effective alternative narratives. One is that the best voices for countering messages of violence or hatred are not necessarily American voices. Like if we want to engage with ISIS, we're English speakers and we're far removed. Really the most effective communities are people based in, if we're talking about ISIS, the Middle East. And which is why I think you've seen at the American policy level a lot of focus towards shifting towards institutions like the Sawab Center, which is based in the UAE for generating and amplifying messages of peace and counteracting ISIS narratives. The other observation I would make is that to be effective, it seems that counter messaging can't take place at the 10,000-foot level, meaning that like a message from a complete stranger isn't likely to shift someone's opinions. Really, what we're finding is that for people who are radicalizing, it's a peer-to-peer network that causes people to join violent movements like the Islamic State. People join because their brother or their cousin or a friend of theirs has joined and has told them that it's a worthy cause, that it's something exciting and meaningful. And so that means that if we're going to actually effectively counteract these radicalization movements, we need to find a way not just to like tweet messages out from our own personal accounts, but to actually engage the communities themselves in countering extremism. And that means that when we're looking at technologies, we need to have we need to be looking at the technologies the communities themselves can employ, as opposed to foreign outsiders. And then finally, the one answer might be that there are realms in which technology is not actually pertinent and material. We should be looking at the reasons that these groups, the forces that anger people in societies, and legitimate concerns about corrupt, authoritarian societies that aren't responding to the legitimate needs and ambitions of their people. And although it might be out of place to say this in a tech for peacebuilding conversation, I think it's important that even technologists who want to use tools for peace remember that there are fundamental elements that drive people towards radicalization that are not directly related to technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to throw a few out. We have only a few minutes left, so I'll throw out a few questions that we've gotten. A lot of the discussion has been about sort of younger generations. But some of these conflicts, they depend on sort of people who are a little bit older to actually resolve them in diplomatic means. So can tech serve, one of the first questions we got was, can tech serve as a platform for track one negotiations? Are we going to see leaders negotiate over Twitter? Those type of questions. Another question I'm going to throw out there, just in the interest of time, is how is it important for a game to address head-on peace or specific conflict? And what do you think sometimes are the most important, merely building a familiarity between people, or does the game actually have to address peace? And then another question, I mean, there are several authoritarian countries around the world that are involved in conflicts, and sometimes people getting online and doing some peace advocacy online, whether it's a game or social media, sometimes it ends them up in trouble in their authoritarian state. So how, as peace builders, do you deal with that sort of authoritarianism problem? Because some of these conflicts are in countries like this. And I open those questions up to all of you, whoever wants to take them on.
I'll go quickly and answer a couple of those questions. On the game side, does the game have to be about peace? Does the subject matter of the game have to be about peace? I would strongly say no. Again, the World of Warcraft example, the other examples of cooperative, collaborative games, creating relationships, the heart rate syncing, those weren't games about your heart rate syncing. Those weren't games about peace, but they had the byproduct of being fun, getting people interacting, and starting to build trust by playing together. And so when you're playing the same game together, you're building trust, you're more likely to be willing to listen to that person, to treat them as a human, and that's really the basis for peace. But it is step 0.5. It's that recognition is not necessarily going to turn someone from a passive bystander to someone who's advocating for peace, and so there have to be next steps. In terms of older generations, I think 60% or something like over 50% of people who play Candy Crush are 25 to 40 years old. A big demographic of the people who we're building our games for actually at home, who are on their phones bored playing these games. And so while that's not exactly the diplomacy level that we're talking about, but mobile games do have the ability to reach not only a young generation, but parents with kids who want to play with their children. That's a huge demographic that we're targeting. So I would highly advocate for build for fun first, build for a wide audience, and then once you get those users, once you get those people engaged, you're then able to maybe show them an advertisement for peace or get them involved in some of these other organizations that take you from step 0.5 to active peace builder.
Great.
I'll comment on first two questions, and I'll start with the game. So I absolutely agree with Justin because we're talking about kids, and if you don't make it fun, no one will actually get involved. So yes, you might have this shiny, bright educational game, but you won't have involvement or participation rate. So that's when we're working with the Peace Park. Though it says Peace Park and it says peace, when you play it, you're not really disturbed with all this educational messages or something that's knocking on your mind that, oh, this is so cool, you have to make it. Rather, we want these players themselves to understand and realize this concept just like by the time they finish the game, or they might not even realize it consciously, but it will be somewhere in their mind. And as we're doing this Minecraft, there's nothing peaceful in Minecraft. It's just a sandbox game, and we're just giving them a crazy task, like do a creative project, and some people made a statue of a huge minion. So it's, you just make it fun as well as, of course you have to make sure it doesn't bring more violence. So we had to moderate and make sure, they're not destructive to each other when they're building something, or they're not using some word that they should not. So and then in Minecraft, they have a common enemy, which are zombies. So this is also fun because they both had to defeat zombies together overnight. So this is all about collaboration, and it doesn't have to say like it's all about peace building. And I'm against mentioning any kind of real space or saying this is happening in here and showing any maps or something, because I feel it's very sensitive and it might really hold back a lot of young people to participate from the project or play the game. And the first question about track 1, I think yes. I don't think Twitter might be the best solution because it's very public. I guess they if they want to go public, that's perfect. But in general, I think virtual exchange among governments and in general track 1 diplomacy is really an opportunity because it's very flexible. You can do it anytime from anywhere, and it just gives you a platform to interact and discuss. So why not?
Okay, we have 2 final questions. Can I? One of them is to Derek, so I will just mention the first one, which is, are you building these games on open source software? So anyone can answer that one. And then if Derek, we have the final question. Well, we have one more question. How do we access participants in areas where we have lower internet connectivity and speed? Sort of the low-tech problems. And then finally for Derek, and this will be the last question, encountering extremist influence, do you find it more sensible to name those extremist influences, not to name those extremist influences so as not to give them more power?
Whew. Okay, so a few questions in there. I'll try to be brief. On the very first point, just about the importance of focusing on youth, I think in the Middle East, more than 30% of the population is between the ages of 15 and 29. And in Iraq, I think at least 50% of the population is under the age of 19. So it's incredibly important that if we're doing peace-building activities, that we need to engage these youth. And frankly, although the question about whether technology is applicable to track 1 efforts is important, I think that the interesting thing to come out of the development of technology recently is how it facilitates the dialogue between decision makers and the wealth of population. So whether that means social media makes world leaders more accessible to populations, or whether it really, what I'm trying to say is that technology has the impact of expanding the number of people who can participate in a conversation. As far as the final 2 questions, focusing on I'm sorry, could you remind me? there was one on
One is on building these games on open source software. Another one is how do you deal with access people who are in areas with lower internet connectivity. And then the final was also about just extremism and is it important to name extremists or not.
All right, rapid fire. Highly recommend a tool called Unity, which is a free tool for developers to make video games. It's how I learned how to make video games, and it's a great place to start for people looking to build multi-platform. That's iOS, PC, web-based, PC, Linux, Mac, whatever, games. So highly recommend that as a tool for people to create gaming products. In terms of connectivity, it's an excellent question because while internet is expanding and the number of people with access to the internet and mobile devices is just going up and up and up, it is not internet penetration is not everywhere. But I think that there are some really creative projects coming out of people who are working in limited environments. For example, I'm talking to one woman who's working at the UNDP in Yemen. And we're experimenting with the idea of using SMS messages to have a story-based game through, tiny messages online, using existing technologies that are already used for like survey tools. So the moral of the story is that resource limitation and design limitation actually foster some of the coolest creativity that we see in games. And then the final idea, whether it's important not to name actors like, radical actors online, I think that it's inevitable that we need to name these people in our work. But the point that I would come away with is that it's not castigating the Islamic State or Daesh that's going to stop people from radicalizing. It's from addressing the issues that Daesh is exploiting to drive radicalization. So if we as peace builders can make a more just society, and if we can advocate for people to basically be more peaceful in building a state and building social institutions, then we are more likely to stop radical forces like Daesh and Boko Haram from radicalizing people and being effective in their propaganda campaigns.
Okay, great. Justin, any final thoughts?
Just quick on the Unity platform. If you're looking to get started, Unity, as Derek mentioned, is amazing. That's what we're building on. When I first built my prototype, I found freelancers on a site called Upwork. It's really cheap to find someone to build you a prototype if you have an idea. And building a prototype is an amazing way to get started, to show potential donors, to show potential investors that your idea has traction. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Nino.
I also said technical problems because yes, it was a well, because infrastructure readiness was not as expected. Am I talking? The solution can
I think we're losing you. You're echoing.
Justin, I think your mic's
Yeah, because I was hearing my voice. Okay. Yeah, so just very quick. So you might want to explore the ways how you can make this virtual exchange asynchronous. So sometimes when we wanted for the team to get virtually together and at the same time, someone would just be cut off the internet, or there would be light blackout. So you might want to try to make it mixed. So some things you have virtual, but some things where you kind of leave it up to kids to do like as a homework, and then for others to come back to it and add on what others have done. So I guess there are different ways how to play with the technical infrastructure problems.
All right. Well, this has been a great discussion. I want to thank all three of you, and I want to thank everyone who's been watching and sending us very insightful questions. I apologize for having this go a little bit longer, but I think we had a great discussion, and maybe we can all get together again at some point in the future, and particularly when you have a new group of games and have other things going on. So I just want to, on behalf of the Carnegie Endowment and the Eurasia Foundation and all of the organizations of our panelists today, I want to thank everyone for joining, and hopefully we can do this again sometime soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Yeah.